Over the last year or so, I've started journaling, or more specifically, trying to build the habit of making time every day to sit down with a notebook and catch some of my thoughts. I've actually been blown away by how much this simple idea has helped me to become more creative. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I've learned through this process and explain how journaling helps me to be more creative. I was writing down some ideas for some videos that I'm working on over the last couple of weeks. And I was out of the studio for work and holidays, but every time a thought or an idea popped into my head, I just scribbled it down on a notepad that I had in my pocket. And that got me thinking about how journaling, or the simple act of carrying one of these little things around in my pocket everywhere I go, has probably been the best thing that I've done over the last 12 or so months to help me to become more creative. So in this video, I wanted to explain how my simple process of journaling has really helped with my creative process. It's not going to be one of those videos on journaling techniques or tips or anything like that. Partly, I think, because there's a lot of those out there already, but also because my simple approach to journaling isn't overly sophisticated or technical. I just carry a small notepad everywhere I go, just something that can fit straight into my pocket, and I pull it out whenever I have a thought. In general, I usually go through about one notepad per week, and it's generally focused on or devoted to one core idea that I'm thinking about for that week that's just churning away in the back of my mind. Whenever I then have a thought related to that, I just pull out the notepad, scribble down those ideas, or just sketch out little concepts. And at the back of the notepad, I just have an area where I can flip it over and jot down other ideas and thoughts that may not be related to that specific core idea, but are just things that I think of in the moment and I don't want to lose track of. Despite it being such a simple process, I've kind of been amazed by how much it's helped me to tap into a different part of my creative brain. So in this video, I just wanted to explain how journaling has helped with my creative process in three particular ways: in helping me to better capture my ideas and thoughts, to help me to clear and open up my mind, and to help me to build better creative habits. And hopefully this will provide you with some ideas and inspiration and encourage you to have a go if this is something that you've been thinking about trying for yourself. This first point, capturing your thoughts, is probably the most obvious one. But if you're like me or most creative people, you've probably got millions of different thoughts bubbling around in your head. You'll often find that you'll be thinking about one particular thought or idea. Something different will pop into your mind, and then your head will just head off in a completely different direction. And I think too, because when I'm trying to work my way through ideas or problems, it's not a direct and structured path. It kind of ebbs and flows and changes direction as different ideas drop in. Sometimes I'll start with a particular thought and then I'll head in a different direction, and I'll end up in a place where I kind of can't even remember where I started or what I was doing along the way. And whilst I think that free-flowing kind of thought process is a really important part of the overall creative process, and it's kind of essential for coming up with new and creative ideas, it also means at the same time that a lot of the best thoughts and ideas that pop into your head can just quickly disappear or even get lost along the way. I just find this simple act of having a small notepad in my pocket means that when a thought pops into my head, I can just quickly scribble it down. Or if I've got a moment and I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking about a particular idea or problem, I can just sketch out the thoughts or key ideas as I'm going along. It's just a great way to capture those thoughts and make sure that less of those thoughts and ideas are lost. But it also kind of acts as a prompt or a tool that I find just keeps bringing my mind back to the original idea or problem that I'm trying to work my way through. I guess it gives me the little bit of structure I need to guide my thought process, but at the same time, it doesn't become a barrier that stops new ideas or that free-flowing kind of thought process. Now, I've never looked into the science of this, but maybe it's something that you too can relate to. If I sit down and I'm trying to work out a problem, if I'm in front of the computer, for whatever reason, I can start to try to write sentences or structure thoughts, and I just seem to shape them and reshape them, and often end up sitting there kind of blankly staring at the screen and don't really seem to get anywhere. But for some reason, if I pull out a notepad, it seems less formal and it connects with a different part of my brain. And for whatever reason, the ideas seem to just flow better. If I sit down in a cafe or in my lounge, or I'm sitting in having breakfast and I pull out the notepad and just start scribbling thoughts, the words and ideas seem to flow really freely. Admittedly, they're rougher, but the point is that the ideas and thoughts just seem to come out more easily. It seems like it's a sweet spot between having nothing to capture your thoughts and guide your thinking versus sitting down in front of the computer and committing yourself to a particular problem or feeling like you're working hard on something. For some reason, it's in that space in between that my creativity and brain seems to work the best. And that's the first way that journaling has really helped with my creative process. I've just found it's a great way to capture my thoughts and make sure that less of my ideas are lost. But it's also, for me, a really effective way to help me to draw out new ideas. I think this second point about clearing your mind is the one that's had the biggest impact on my creative process. Now, I know I'm not saying anything original when I talk about how much information and stimulation we're continually bombarded with in our daily lives. When you combine this with how surrounded we are continually by technology and the habits we've developed in regard to our phones, it's not surprising that we struggle to find the space and time within our daily lives to, I guess, clear our minds and have the mental downtime for new and creative ideas to filter into our minds. And I'm obviously not missing the irony that if you're watching this video, it's highly likely that you're doing it on your phone. And that's okay. I'm not trying to be preachy. I think there's a lot of value in the things you can find if you look in the right places. And I spend a lot of time watching videos and flicking through things to find new ideas and inspiration. The point that I'm trying to make is that I think, at least in my experience, one of the most important parts of the creative process and tapping into your creative brain happens in the little bits of downtime and the small gaps that we end up finding in our day. It's the times when you're sitting at the bus stop, or you're in a cafe and you're sitting on your own, or you've just got 10 minutes and you're having some breakfast. It's those gaps in between consciously working on things and having a bit of downtime where I think the thoughts from the back of your mind sort of bubble to the surface, and different ideas and thinking seems to be able to connect. It's the gap in between the input mode where new information and stimulation is coming into your brain, and the output mode where you're actually consciously working on things. It's that space in between where I think the creative brain does some of its best work. Whether we're conscious of it or not, we've all kind of developed the habit or been trained that whenever you have those spare moments in your day, you pull out your phone and start scrolling. We're all the same. I do it as well. But what happens, or how I look at it, is that your brain then kicks back into the input mode to absorb that information. And that little space of time or opportunity for your brain or your creative brain to actually tick through ideas that are in the back of your head is kind of lost. I find for me, I can sometimes stare at my phone for half an hour and then I can't really remember what I've looked at. Somehow my brain feels completely full, but at the same time, strangely, kind of completely empty. On the other hand, if I pull out my notepad, I don't have any expectations around producing something like I'm sitting in front of my computer at work. It just helps me to not go back into that input mode and start downloading more information, and it somehow keeps my brain more clear and open. And as I said before, doing the phone thing is fine. Everyone does it. The point I'm trying to make is that if we can start to understand the value that these small gaps in our day have for our brain and our creativity, then we can start to think about how we can use them differently to help us to boost our creativity. So over the last 12 or so months, I've just started carrying a little notepad and a pen with me basically everywhere I go. Whenever I have these spare moments in my day, I've tried to develop the habit of, rather than pulling out my phone, I try to pull out the notepad instead. Sometimes I'll sit there and I won't write anything at all. Other times I'll have a particular problem that I'm thinking through and I'll just be madly jotting away. Other times my head will just be heading in all different directions, and every now and then I'll jot down something so that I don't lose track of it or I can come back to it later. The output is not really the important part of it for me. It's more about the process of pulling that out rather than going for my phone and inputting more information. I find just having the notepad, it helps me to keep my mind more open and clear, and it just makes me feel like my mind stays in a more open and creative state throughout the day. But this simple, or trying to develop this simple habit of carrying the notepad with me, and when I have these spare moments, pulling that out rather than my phone, it's really helped me to feel like my mind is clearer and I guess just feel more creative throughout the day. If it's something you haven't tried before, I'd really encourage you to give it a go. Don't put any pressure on yourself. Don't feel like you've got to write a novel or solve the world's problems every time you pull the notepad out. Just try it out. I think you might find that it ends up making your head feel clearer, connecting you more with your thoughts, and just generally making you feel more creative. The third way that journaling has helped me to become more creative is it's given me a bit more structure, or made me become a bit more intentional about having fixed time set aside in my day as being creative time. It seems like to me, everywhere you look and everyone you talk to these days talks about how busy they are just doing the everyday stuff and how difficult it is to find the time in your day to do the things that you actually find enjoyable or meaningful, or that are actually going to get you to where you want to go. I also find, for some reason, that the creative and artistic sort of things, whether it's painting or, making music or whatever it is somehow seen as being kind of non-essential or less important or less of a priority than the things that we have to do. I guess it's no surprise then that if you're not intentional about that process, of setting aside fixed times in your day for those creative acts, then they'll just slide down the list of priorities and sometimes just fall off the list altogether. I think it's really important to set aside time in your day, even if it's 15 minutes, to sit down, connect with your thoughts, do the creative thing, the creative act, or whatever it is that's important to you, because it just builds a habit of keeping that creative thing alive and making it part of your daily life. For me, I've used journaling as a tool to build that habit. I just started by allocating 15 minutes in the evening after I'd had dinner and before I was too tired, just to sit down with a notepad, just sketch out, some ideas or thoughts in regard to something, and no pressure to produce anything in particular. Sometimes I use that time to do something different, like research something other thing, like a creative thing like photography or something that I'm interested in. But the important part is building that as a habit or a time for creativity within my daily routine. I know some people will find it harder than others to carve out that time. It can be 10 minutes or 5 minutes, it doesn't really matter. For me, the important part is just starting to build that creative habit of allocating the time for creativity as part of your everyday life. Sometimes it's those little things, the little habits that we set up, those initial steps that we take of giving the time, just simply giving the time to our passions, whatever they are, that can end up having the biggest impact on our creative lives into the future. As I said at the start of the video, I think journaling is probably the number one thing that's had the biggest impact on my creative process over the last 12 or so months. Hopefully, some of the things I've shared have provided you with some ideas, and if it's something that you haven't tried out for yourself before, hopefully it'll inspire you to give it a go. If you do try it out, or it's something that you already do as part of your creative process, I really would love to hear from you. I really enjoy hearing other people's experiences and learning from other people. And even if it doesn't end up working for you, or it's not something that you end up sticking to, hopefully it will at least get you into the habit of building in time for creativity as part of your everyday life.